Thanks for joining me on the news. Alheri Moses is sitting by with news from Nigeria. On global news, U.S. enforces new China visa curbs. United Nations asks to cut ties with Myanmar junta. Report says Russia's General Surovikin dismissed. And still in Russia, Russia repels 3 combat drones raid on Moscow, and Russia may annex Georgian breakaway regions. The United States has announced new visa curbs against Chinese officials alleged to have been involved in the suspected forced assimilation of more than 1 million children in state-run boarding schools in Tibet. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken did not name the individuals involved, but urged Beijing to end its coercive policies in the culturally distinct Far Western region. In a statement, Blinken said these coercive policies seek to eliminate Tibet's distinct linguistic, cultural, and religious traditions among younger generations of Tibetans. We urge PRC authorities to end the coercion of Tibetan children into government-run boarding schools and to cease repressive assimilation policies, both in Tibet and throughout other parts of the PRC, he said, using an acronym for the People's Republic of China. In February, a group of United Nations experts expressed concern that the residential school system appeared to act as a mandatory large-scale program intended to assimilate Tibetans into majority Han culture. It said the system was expanding as rural schools were closed and about 1 million children had now been separated from their families to attend such institutions where they were forced to complete a compulsory education curriculum in the Mandarin Chinese language with no substantive study of Tibetan language, history, and culture. As a result, Tibetan children are losing their facility with their native language and the ability to communicate easily with their parents and grandparents in the Tibetan language, which contributes to the assimilation and erosion of their identity, they said in a statement. The latest visa restrictions comes as Washington and Beijing attempt to repair a relationship fractured over issues from trade to the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, the treatment of the mostly Muslim Uyghurs, and the situation in Taiwan. Beijing dismissed the latest U.S. moves as spares that seriously undermine China-U.S. relations. Liu Pingyong, a Chinese spokesman for the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C., said the schools were set up to cater to the needs of the local population. Boarding schools have gradually developed into one of the important modes of running schools in China's ethnic minority areas, and the centralized way of running schools effectively solves the problem of the ethnic minority students' difficulty in attending school at a distance where the local people live scattered, he said. The U.S. appointed veteran diplomat Uzra Zeya as Tibet coordinator last December with a remit to promote substantive dialogue between China and the Dalai Lama and push to protect the human rights and fundamental freedoms of the Tibetan people. The coordinator's office, which works within the State Department, was established by the Tibetan Policy Act of 2002. China took control of Tibet in 1950 as part of what it described as the peace liberation of the region. The Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, fled into exile in India after a failed uprising against Chinese rule in 1959. He has called Beijing's control a cultural genocide. Beijing claims he is a dangerous separatist and instead recognizes the current Panchen Lama as the highest religious figure in Tibet. The Panchen Lama was installed by the party. On humanitarian crisis, civil society groups working in Myanmar have criticized United Nations Relief Chief Martin Griffiths over his recent trip to the country, saying his visit failed to make substantial progress on humanitarian assistance and lent legitimacy to coup leaders who had weaponized aid. Griffiths, the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, traveled to Naypyidaw last week, where he was pictured on the front page of reports Myanmar in a handshake with Army Chief Senior General Mi Aung Hlaing, who led the military's February 2021 power grab. During the 3-day trip, Griffiths also visited a camp for displaced Rohingya and a village near Sittwe in the northwestern state of Rakhine, which was devastated by Cyclone Mocha 3 months ago. The United Nations Relief Chief's visit also took place as flooding and landslide caused by monsoon rains left at least 5 people dead in the Bago region between Naypyidaw and Yangon, the country's biggest city. In a joint statement shared by Progressive Voice, the 514 civil society groups acknowledged Griffiths' post-visit call for space for safe, sustained aid deliveries, but said that could not be achieved by working with the military, which has been accused of preventing assistance from reaching those most in need, particularly as a result of the deepening conflict triggered by its coup. Principled humanitarian engagement must see OCHA, Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and other humanitarian United Nations agency cut ties with the illegal criminal junta, which is weaponizing aid and is the root cause of human suffering in Myanmar, the civil society group said. Myanmar was plunged into crisis by the coup as the generals cracked down violently on opposition to power grab. Some have taken up arms in a bid to restore civilian rule, joining forces with ethnic armed groups that have been fighting the military for decades, while the National Unity Government, NUG, of deposed MPs and others have sought to secure international recognition. During the 3-day trip, Griffiths also visited a camp for displaced Rohingya and a village near Sitwe in northwestern state of Rakhine. Myanmar was plunged into crisis by the coup, and the generals cracked down violently on opposition to their power grab. Now moving to Russia-Ukraine war, Russian General Sergei Surovikin, who at one time was commander of Moscow's war effort in Ukraine, has been dismissed as head of the country's aerospace forces, according to reports. Alexei Venediktov, the well-connected former editor-in-chief of the now-defunct Echo Moskv Echo of Moscow, said on his Telegram channel on Tuesday that Surovikin had been removed, citing an official decree. Surovikin will remain in the defense ministry after his deposition, according to him. The decree has not yet been made public, but several nationalist Russia military blogs also reported on the same replacement. Surovikin was commander-in-chief of Russian units in Ukraine from October 2022 to January 2023. He was the commander who ordered the withdrawal of Russian troops from the southern Ukraine city of Kherson in November 2022. There was no official confirmation of Venediktov's report, though the report later on Tuesday also said that Surovikin has been dismissed, citing its own sources. According to more reports, Surovikin is currently on short-term leave. On Wednesday, that Surovikin was replaced by a Russian Air Force commander. Ex-chief of the Russian Air and Space Forces, Sergei Surovikin, has now been relieved of his post, while Colonel General Viktor Asvalov, head of the main staff of the Air Force, is temporarily acting as commander-in-chief of the Air Force, according to reports. He has not been seen in public since the short-lived mutiny in June by the Wagner mercenary group and its leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, against Russia's defense establishment. Still on Russia-Ukraine war, Russian air defenses shot down 2 unmanned aerial vehicles, UAV, and electronically disabled another over central Moscow, the latest raid on Russia's capital city, Moscow, by combat drones that authorities have accused Ukraine of launching. Russia's defense ministry said one drone was jammed electronically and crashed into a building in downtown Moscow early on Wednesday morning, and 2 more were shot down by air defense systems outside the capital. Moscow's mayor Sergei Sobyanin said on the Telegram messaging app that one downed drone had hit a building that was under construction in central Moscow, and another was shot down in a district to the west of the city. According to him, and I quote, "Tonight, air defense shot down a drone in Mosaky district of Moscow region. The second UAV hit a building under construction in the city." Russia's defense ministry said that the third drone was shot down in the Khimkis district of Moscow. Reports said air traffic at Moscow's Vnukovo, Sheremetyevo, and Domodinov airports was halted, and the second day in a row that operations were disrupted at the airports due to a drone attack on the capital. Operations at the airports resumed later on Wednesday morning. Russia said emergency services were inspecting the area in the business district, according to Sobyanin. Sobyanin and the defense ministry said there were no reports of casualties. According to video footages shared on Russian language social media on Wednesday, which purported to capture the moment the drone crashed into an office block, showed a bright light flashed by a large explosion and smoke. Now, let's shift gear on border disputes. Russia's Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy secretary of Kremlin's powerful Security Council, has warned that Moscow could annex Georgia's breakaway regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, according to reports. Medvedev, who has cast himself as one of Moscow's most hawkish political voices since Russia forces launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, accused, according to report on Wednesday, of creating tension over Georgia by discussing its possible membership in the NATO military alliance. According to reports, the idea of joining Russia is still popular in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Medvedev, a former Russian president, wrote in an article published, and he said it could quite possibly be implemented if there are good reasons for that, he said in the article. While Russian relations with Georgia have improved since Tbilisi and Moscow fought a brief but bloody war in 2008 over the breakaway Abkhazia and South Ossetia regions, Medvedev said that Moscow will not hesitate to act if concerns regarding possible NATO admission come close to being a reality. We will not wait for our concerns being closer to reality, he said in the article, referring to possible annexation. Georgian officials have repeatedly said they are committed to joining the United States-led NATO military alliance, viewing it as a way to preserve the territorial integrity of their country. The military alliance states on its official website that Georgia is one of NATO's closest partners. It aspires to join the alliance. Over time, a broad range of practical cooperation has developed between NATO and Georgia, which supports Georgia's reform efforts and its goal of Euro-Atlantic integration, according to NATO. Now, on more stories, India's historic Chandrayaan-3 set for landing. India could become the first nation to land a spacecraft on the moon's south pole days after a Russian probe crashed in the same region, a historic moment for the world's most populous nation as it rapidly closes in on milestones set by global space powers. Chandrayaan-3, which means mooncraft in Sanskrit, is scheduled to touch down shortly after 6 p.m. Indian time on Wednesday near the little explored lunar south pole. India reaches for the moon, the Times of India says, with the hope for lunar landing dominating local news. It's D-Day for moon mission, the Indian Times says. A previous Indian effort failed in 2019, and the latest attempt comes just days after Russia's first moon mission in almost 50 years, destined for the same region, crashed on the lunar surface. But former Indian Space Chief K. Sivan said the latest photos transmitted back home by the lander gave every indication the final leg of the voyage could succeed. It is given some encouragement that we will be able to achieve the landing mission without any problem, he said, according to report. Sivan added that the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, had made corrections after a failure 4 years ago when scientists lost contact with the previous lunar module moments before its slated landing. Chandrayaan-3 is going to go with more ruggedness, he said. We have confidence and we expect that everything will go smoothly. The mission was launched nearly 6 weeks ago in front of thousands of cheering spectators, but took much longer to reach the moon than those of the Apollo missions in the 1960s and the 1970s, which arrived in a matter of days. In African scenes, BRICS, Lula da Silva defends closer ties with Africa. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Brazilian president, defended closer ties with African countries during his speech at the BRICS Business Forum on Tuesday in Johannesburg. The BRICS group is composed of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the world's largest emerging economies. The bloc already is home to 40% of the world's population and responsible for over 30% of global economic output, and more than 20 nations have applied to join, according to South African officials, including Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. Brazil is back on the continent it should never have left. Africa offers vast opportunities and enormous potential for growth, said the Brazilian president. The BRICS have a unique chance to shape the trajectory of global development. You, entrepreneurs, are part of this effort. Our countries together represent a third of the world economy. Former President Jair Bolsonaro didn't visit the African continent during his 4-year term in office. The meeting was also attended by the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russia's President Vladimir Putin did not attend but sent representatives to the event. And finally, on global news, Niger, M16 calls for French troops withdrawal. A civil society group in Niger known as M62 has called on France to withdraw its troops from the country. On Monday, Abdoulaye Sado, leader of M62, a civil society coalition, opposed the French military presence in Niger, asserted that his movement will not stop until French forces leave. Some 1,500 French soldiers have been in Niger since Paris made the country the heart of its Sahel operation last year. Abdoulaye Sado, M2 national coordinator, said, and I quote, "We won't give the French forces 1 second on our territory once this deadline has expired, and the CNSP itself has made it clear. All the villages, all the surrounding communes will descend on the capital, and we will get them out. Niamey's ruling military denounced a series of military agreements with France on August 3rd, some of which included a one-month notice period. In recent months, fervent anti-French sentiment has been on the rise across France's former colonies in West Africa. News from Nigeria will be coming right after this break with Alheri Moses. But before then, a recap of major stories says U.S. enforces new China visa curbs. United Nations acts to cut ties with Myanmar junta. Report says Russia's general Surovikin dismissed. Russia repels 3 combat drones raid on Moscow, and Russia may annex Georgian breakaway regions. Stay with us.
It's Zuma Nigeria. Thanks for joining me. In the news, Tinubu meets ECOWAS President Abdulsalami over Niger. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu met with the President of the Economic Community of West African State, ECOWAS, Omar Torre, and Nigeria's former military head of state Abdulsalami Abubakar. The meeting, which is reportedly being held over the political instability in the Republic of Niger and how to resolve the crunch, has the National Security Advisor to President Tinubu, I beg your pardon, Nuhu Rabido, in attendance. Nigeria's former ruler, on Saturday, Abubakar led a delegation of ECOWAS to Niger in a last-ditch diplomatic effort to reach a peaceful resolution with the junta. The delegation met with the hosted Niger President Mohamed Bazoum after meeting with Chiani, but no truce has been reached yet. General Abdurrahman Chiani, the leader of Niger junta, however, stated in a televised broadcast on Saturday night that the army would only hand over power to the civilian government in the next 3 years. ECOWAS, through its Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Abdel Fattah Musa, revealed on Sunday that it won't accept the Republic of Niger junta 3 years transition plan. He described Chiani's proposal as a spokesman for dialogue and diplomacy. On Tuesday, the African Union said it has suspended Niger until civilian rule in the country is restored. AU also said in a statement that it would not accept the applications of any armed intervention in the troubled Sahel nation. Finally, Dizani charged with bribery and fraud. Dizani Alison Madueke, ex-petroleum minister, had been charged with bribery taken by the United Kingdom police. Alison Madueke is alleged to have accepted €100 in cash, chauffeur-driven cars, flight on private jets, luxury holidays for her family, and the use of several London properties from oil and gas contractors. Other gratification listed against her by the International Corrupt Union of UK National Crime Agency are furniture gifts, renovation work and staff for the London properties, payment of private tuition, and gifts from high-end design shops such as Cartier Jewelry and Louis Vuitton Goods. Alison Madueke, who presently lives in St. John's Wood, an upmarket area of West London, according to reports, will appear before Westminster Magistrate Court on October 2nd. The 63-year-old Bayelsa-born former senator official of Shell Petroleum served as an important figure in the administration of ex-President Goodluck Jonathan administration between 2010 and 2015. She also acted as president of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. The former minister had been on bail since first being arrested in London in October 2015. According to reports, soon after her arrest, her family's lawyer said she would strongly contest corruption allegations that have dogged her during and after her time as minister. The family also announced that she had undergone chemotherapy for breast cancer. In March, the NCA, which aims international and organized crimes, provided evidence by the United States Department of Justice, allowing them to recover assets totaling $53.1 million. linked to Alison Muddy case alleged corruption. The Federal High Court Abuja had in January 2022 issued a second arrest warrant against Alison Muddy over money laundering by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. That's the news. Thanks for joining.